I'm recording. Okay. So one thing is on Tuesday, we will have class, but I'll make it available on Zoom. And so if you're away, you don't have to like stay this late on Tuesday. If you're traveling or what have you, it will be available on Zoom. This afternoon, I'm getting the sort of the normal amount of Zoom traffic, but in the morning, I already had more Zoom traffic than usual already. So I don't know if people have left or it's just a fluke, but sort of on Tuesday, I will be here. You're welcome to come in, but I'm not expecting you to be here. I'm not going to hold it against you, but there will be some kind of class. And please, if you're in that class, remind me to record so that if people can't be here at that time, then they can at least listen back to it. Okay. So I had a question about the XML. So let me open up. That was from the 16th. So let's do it in a, I'll just overload it in this window. Oh, well, okay. So this was the example where we read from XML. And the first thing is that where's the XML located? And it is in res, and then you make an XML folder and you put the XML folder, the XML file in the XML folder in the res folder. So just like we had raw, this is XML. So you would right click here and say new directory and say XML. I already have it, so I'm not going to do it again. And make sure it's all small letters because we have to have our naming convention respected. And so that's where the data file goes in res in XML, and there's the file. And then here is the code which is accessing that file. So among the resources, there was a method get XML, and here's the r.xml horse racing. So that is the system looking for within the resources, under the XML resources, looking for a resource named horse racing. And as normal, no file extension when we're getting a resource. So that's where the file goes. And then we read it in a while loop. So our JSON tended to be read all at once and just interpreted. We have to do a little bit more work for XML. So there's this while loop, so the while loop continues until we're at the end of the document, then it stops. So while we're not at the end of the document, keep going. And then the structure of XML is this sort of tag-based thing. So we are, this event tells us sort of what kind of a thing we're encountering. Are we encountering the end of the document? Are we encountering a start tag or an end tag or something in the middle? And so within the while, so long as we're not at the end of the document, then the if is most of our actions, the way we've set it up, are on the start tag. And then we get the name of the tag and do different things depending on the name of the tag. And then we have these nexts, which move us from the tag to what's in between the two tags, and then into the ending tag, and so on. So, but that is the example to model yourself on for that XML lab. And that's where you get started. That's where the resource gets put. Also, we had in JSON has built in the object and array structure, whereas XML does not. So we created, we wanted that object functionality, so we wrote our own function, which was just a function consisting of properties. We didn't have any fancy methods here. And so we had a class horse in a horse file. Again, right click, say new Kotlin file. I named it horse. And then it does have a package. So if you're copying it from one place to the other, be careful that you don't disrupt the package. That throws things off. Okay, so that was a question about the XML lab. Anything else on the XML lab while it's up? No. Okay. So let me go back to the so this is just a blank lab at this point, and so I've been having issues in this is a completely fresh sort of hello world, and I haven't done anything to. And we know that we had to change 31s to 30s. That's been sort of an issue sort of all along. And then that stopped working. But I'm going to sort of just do that and then run it. And I haven't come up with a consistent solution. So now that is not been enough, that I've been getting these sort of newer error messages. And then 2 weeks ago or so, I gave you this announcement about changes to the Gradle, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So we'll see if this works. And I'll also show you another thing that has sometimes worked so that you have some approaches to get around this issue. And then I'll tell you the one case where I'm not sure I have a workaround yet. So here's this new thing from like 2 weeks ago and sync it. And this, I've had this work earlier today. This worked in this room, but it was not working in the other room last night. So I don't know what this is all about, but let's see if this one works here. And then I'll do the other one just for sort of complete, whether this one works or not, I'll do the other one just for sort of completion. So the other one didn't work, so I had, and now this one is working. So my previous working thing was I think one of the XML, the horse lab. And now this one is now working. Stop it and start it. So there, you just saw the horse go away, and here's the hello world. So that is working here, but here's the other thing. I'm going to take that away. And I'm going to show you another approach. So the more possible solutions, the more likely you'll be able to get around this. This was a different change that was working for me, at least when the other one wasn't. And this is to replace the whole set of dependencies at the bottom. So this is just the dependencies from an old hello world. And I just came down here and replaced all the dependencies. And hit sync now. And let's stop it and start it. And there's the horse racing silk. And this is going to take a little while to run, but so that's another thing you can do to get a hello world working. I've had the second one work where the first one didn't, at least in one situation. But the one situation I could not get to work this morning, and I have to do some more pulling out of my hair. Not that I have much to pull out. The one issue that I'm still having is with the bottom navigation. That sort of activity where we were doing not starting with an empty activity, but starting with the bottom navigation activity. I wasn't getting in this lab, at least at one particular computer, I wasn't getting satisfaction with either of these approaches. So I have to do some more investigating. But that was just that one lab. So if you're working in the lab and that one isn't working, then sort of skip that lab and do other labs until I sort of find a workaround. Or if you have a laptop with enough memory, then do that lab on your computer at home or your laptop, what have you. Okay, so I'm going to get onto the new material, which is a pretty short presentation today because I spent hours working through this stuff last night. But before I do that, are there any questions? Let's see, questions. Okay, so I have now a working hello world. That's what I'll work with, and I'm going to bring down this little program here that makes an array of buttons that respond to a click, and then you will start turning that into a game. So here's the activity main. Copy all that. And that down. I want the res, I want the layout. Activity main. I want code. And I want to paste that in there. And there's not much to this at this stage. There's a text at the top that just says rows and columns. There's a button that just says button. That's stupid. So let's say make the grid. I don't know. I'm going to make a grid of buttons. And then I have a linear layout of the vertical type. So I'm going to make a bunch of buttons and I'm going to arrange them in rows. And this is just a different approach from when we had checkboxes and we had put them in columns. So there I was going, I was arranging them in the different linear layouts going across. And now I'm going to have horizontal linear layouts and make them just taking a different approach. And my linear layouts, my linear layouts inside this linear layout are going to be dynamic. Whereas previously with the dynamic checkboxes, I decided on 3 rows. So I had a linear layout, which was horizontal, and then I had 3 linear layouts, which were vertical, and I put the buttons in one by one. Now, this time around, I'm going to have a linear layout that's vertical. I'm going to make some dynamic linear layouts, which are going to be horizontal, and I'm going to put buttons into those horizontal ones. Just a different approach to sort of get some kind of grid set up. Okay. And I don't have any code yet. I did copy out the code. Do that. Here's the code. And you see there's not much code, so there's not too much me talking today. There's much more you doing. But I'll prompt you to ask me some questions, so maybe you will. Okay. So I pasted in the code. Let's run it and then come back. So it should be more than hello. There's my rows and columns. There's make the grid. And then here's this grid, and these are buttons that have a click event. So if I click them, I get a little toast that just tells me that that was row 7 and column 3. Okay. So here we go with the code. Connect to the button, connect to the linear layout, which was a vertical linear layout. And I'm just hard coding. Here's the number of rows and the number of columns I want. This is the make the grid button. I'm moving over the number of rows. So, and I started counting at 1. So being a bad computer scientist today, I'm starting counting at 1. And I'm making a new linear layout. So I'm using the linear layout constructor. I am setting it to have a horizontal orientation. So the things I put in this linear layout will be arranged horizontally. I'm adding that linear layout to the vertical layout. So I have a container that's already there, and the things I put in that container get arranged vertically. But then those new containers, the things I put in that original container are also containers, and they're horizontal containers. So anything I put in them will be arranged horizontally. Okay. So here is me making a new linear layout, giving it a horizontal orientation, adding it to the vertical linear layout, and then I'm starting an internal, a nested loop. And this time I'm going over the number of columns. And I'm making a new button. I'm setting the text of that button to just a space. And I'm setting the tag of that button to a string that is the number I, an underscore, and the number J. And I'm adding it to my row I just made. And I'm assigning it a listener. And then down here's my listener. And I'm just toasting out that tag. Okay. So that's how I achieve this. Make the grid, blah, blah, blah. Okay. What do I want to do? I'll tell you what I want you to do, and then I'll help you out a little bit. So what you have to do is turn that into a game of memory. So in memory, you have some array or list of things where every item appears twice. So if it were an array of strings of letter and the strings are characters, but these are strings because it's double quotes, and so I could say A, B, B, C, C. And then I'm going to shuffle up that array. Now I would do the shuffling like late. I would test and get everything. It's easy. You want to be able to be to test your game and see if the game is functioning. And so you want to know what happens if the person, what the person's going to try to do is turn over things and get a match, and you have to code it for if there is a match or if there isn't a match. And it'll be easier for you to test if if the array is very small, or if you don't shuffle, or both, then that will make for a very small game where you know where things are, and you'll be able to test all the different scenarios you want to test. So now there's going to be some association between each button and this, in my case, letter. But I don't want to display that. So maybe I'll hide it. Maybe I'll put it in the tag property. We need to sort of count the clicks. I don't really care about the overall count of the click, but I need to know whether it was sort of an odd or first click or a second click. So when you're turning over two items, I have to say, oh, the first one, that was the first one. Oh, I do this. That was the second one. I do that. So it could be just a Boolean. You know, was it the first click or not? So you could work with a Boolean, or you could work with a counter. You could ask whether the count is divisible by 2 or not, evenly divisible by 2 or not, or you could just keep setting it back to 0. 0, 1, set it, you know, from 0 to 1 to 0 to 1. So when you click the first button, one, you're going to disable it so they don't click the same button again. And you're going to display the letter. and then you're going to probably in the buttons text, and then you might also need to remember it. You either remember the button or you remember the letter. Probably easier to remember which button. So maybe you want to give them IDs. Okay. On the second click, you also disable a button. Now you have to see if there's a match or not, and you do different things depending on whether there's a match or not. But the first thing you have to do is sort of slow it down so that you're not acting too quickly before the user gets to sort of see anything. So you're going to start a timer and only do stuff when the timer stops. So you're going to display the letter and start a timer. And then when the timer stops, then you'll see if there's a match. And if they do match, you just carry on. You just leave the buttons disabled and the picture and the two text showing. But if not, you're going to change the button's text property back and re-enable a button so they can continue to press them and play the game. So that is the game, sometimes known as memory, sometimes known as concentration. It's usually sort of a card game. So if I get talking about it and I start talking about cards, that's why. Okay, so let's do at least help you out a little bit here. I don't know, click count. What an obnoxious name. So I'm going to have a click count. So one thing I'm going to do here is increment my click count. And so I can display that. So let me, instead of displaying the tag, you saw me displaying the tag, let me display the click count now. So there's make the board, and now that was the first time I clicked. That was the second time I clicked. My timer slow there. I mean, my toast takes a while. There was the third time I clicked. So I know, so now I can ask if the click is 0, or if the click is, now that I've incremented, I can ask if the click was 1, if the click was 2, do different things. The other thing I need to do is to do something to the buttons. So you're getting here in this click event, you're getting the view, but it's not quite a button. So the view, because I didn't name the argument, so it gets called it by default. And it is a generic view, and it has a tag. That makes sense. So it knows what I mean by the tag. That's how I could print out the tag. It knows what I mean by ID. But it doesn't know what I mean by text. But a button, this view happens to be a button which has does have text. So what I want to do is cast this it, which is a generic view, as a button. Now we've been doing stuff like this forever, or at least since the beginning of the semester, way back. It's one of those things I always sort of have in a spinner. So let's look way back at a spinner. And the one thing I do in my spinners is when I get this view, I cast the view, that view happens to be a text view. So I need something like that. I need to take this view and cast it as something more specific. That's because I can never remember the exact syntax, but I know that we've done it. So I'm going to say, I don't know, my button is this view, which is called it, and it's a button. And so now I've taken this view, which had, it knew about the tag, it knew about the ID, but it didn't know about the text. But now that I've cast it as a button, it knows about text. So you're going to have to do some counting, know whether you're sort of the first or second click. You're going to have to cast it as a button so you can affect its text. And any other questions you want to ask me while we're up here recording? Yes. You would start it on the second timer, I mean, on the second button. So, because the first one, okay, so my click count, if it's equal to 1, I'll do something else. I'll do something else. And because then it's the second one. And I'm also going to, at the end of the second one, set it back to 0. That's just the counting thing. Now, I said in the, if it's not the first click, it's the second click, I'm going to set a timer. So I have to go back to my timer stuff. That's much later. Timer. Sensors. Oh, lab 13. Was it? No. It was after sensors. 15. Here's a timer. Okay. Label things better. So what I want to do here, open that up and grab, here's a timer, countdown timer. Don't forget to start the timer. It's the most important thing, the easiest thing to forget. And what do I want to do? Paste that in here. And what? Start with a countdown timer, Alt Enter. That's 2 seconds. Okay. And then I don't think I want to do anything repeatedly. I want to do something when I finish. And what do I want to do? I'm going to do this first. Copy, cut that, paste it. Okay. So what am I going to do here? I have my button. I'm going to say my text is equal to my tag. Okay, so I'm just going to show my tag for something to show. No, I can get tag. Let me do my button then. Oh, it's probably just the damn two-string thing. Okay. So I'm going to, when they click the button, I'm going to show their tag as their text. And I don't know what I'm going to do if it's number 1, but if it's number 2, I'm going to set the click count back to 0 for the next time. And at the end, I'm going to set the text back to a quote or something, or back to a space. Okay. So let's see that. So I make the grid. If I click on the first one, I show something, nothing I'm really interested in this case, but I show something. And on the second one, I'm going to show something and then take it away after. So that I'm working on with the timer there. So I show something and then I don't know, 2 seconds and it goes away. Now you have to do more. You have to do the logic of was it or was it not a match at the end of the timer? And then you have to take 2 things away. So I haven't given you everything. You still have some work to do. Any other questions at this stage? Okay. So I've got the second one disappearing. You've got to get the logic of is it or is it not a match, and get the first one to disappear. You might play with IDs there. So we could have given them this new button. We played that game when we had check boxes. When we added check boxes, we gave them an ID. So you can play with the ID. That's a possible way to do it. All right. I'm going to shut up and let you go to asking individual questions. So I'm going to stop the recording.